My brother passed away 3 weeks ago, and even now, the house still feels like it's holding its breath. His room is the quietest part of it all. Nothing inside has moved since the day we lost him. I've avoided going in there for as long as I could. Every time I walked past his door, it felt like a wave of memories pushed against me, waiting to pull me under. But today something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the afternoon light slipped through the hallway, or maybe it was the thought that I needed to face the silence he left behind. Whatever it was, I turned the doorknob and stepped inside, not expecting to find anything except dust and emptiness. I never imagined I would find a note. His room still smelled faintly like his cologne, clean, warm, familiar. I stood there taking it in because it was the closest thing I had left of him. I scanned the shelves packed with his old sneakers, the posters he never bothered to replace, and the stack of books he always said he would read one day. It all felt frozen, as if time inside the room had quietly refused to move forward. I wasn't sure why I suddenly felt the urge to check his desk, but my eyes kept drifting toward it. His things were usually messy, but his desk was strangely neat, like someone had intentionally cleared space for something. That's when I saw it. A folded piece of paper tucked beneath his old phone case. It wasn't dusty like the rest of the desk. It looked recent. Too recent. For a moment I just stared at it, unsure if I should touch it. My hands were already shaking before I even reached for it. The paper felt slightly warm, like it had been handled not too long ago, which made no sense. I kept thinking maybe I was imagining things, or maybe someone else had been in his room and left it there. But there was no one who would do that. No one had been in his room except me. I unfolded it slowly, almost afraid to breathe. My brother had a very distinct handwriting, loopy, uneven, always a little messy. And the moment I saw the familiar curves on the paper, my heart dropped. It was his. It was really his handwriting. But the date written at the top wasn't from before he passed away. It was dated today. I felt my chest tighten as I read the first line, simple and straight to the point like he always was. Even though it was only a few words, it felt like the world around me shifted. I couldn't understand how something like this could exist. I kept reading it over and over, convinced I was making a mistake, that maybe grief was playing tricks on me. But deep down I knew the truth. This note wasn't old. And it wasn't something he had written weeks before. It was written after he was gone. I sat down on his bed because my legs felt weak. The room suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were slowly closing in. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know who to tell. It didn't feel like something I could just explain. My brother left a note after he passed away. It sounded impossible, unbelievable, like something you'd hear in a story, not real life. And yet, here it was, sitting in my hands. Memories of him started rushing in, like someone had opened a door inside my mind. His laugh, the arguments we had over the smallest things, the late-night talks we shared when neither of us could sleep. All of it mixed with the confusion and fear I felt now. I kept asking myself the same questions. How could a note appear today? Why would it be dated like that? Was it a message he meant for me to find? Or was someone else involved? Someone who had access to his handwriting, someone who knew something I didn't? I stood up again and walked around the room, searching for any sign that someone might have been here. Nothing looked disturbed. Everything was exactly the way he left it. Except for that note. That single piece of paper was the only thing out of place. The more I stared at it, the more I felt like it wasn't just a coincidence. It felt intentional. Like he wanted me to read it. Like he wanted me to know something he didn't get the chance to say. But the note didn't give explanations. It didn't offer closure. It only raised more questions. Questions I wasn't ready for. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A part of me felt drawn into something deeper. Something hidden, as if this note was only the beginning. As if my brother had left something behind, something important, and this was just the first step toward finding it. I walked over to the window and looked outside, hoping the fresh air would help clear my thoughts, but the world outside felt strangely still. Like it was waiting. Like everything had paused the moment I found that note. I felt a sense of unease growing inside me, not dangerous but heavy, like I was standing at the edge of something that could completely change the way I understood what happened to him. The more I tried to calm myself, the more I felt the need to know the truth, no matter how confusing or unbelievable it might be. I couldn't ignore the note. I couldn't pretend it was nothing. It felt like he was reaching out in the only way he could, and even though it scared me, I knew I had to follow whatever trail this note was leading me toward. I read the last line again, and that was the moment I realized something important. Something hidden between the words, something he must have wanted me to find. But before I could fully piece it together, a soft creaking sound echoed from the hallway. I froze. Someone, or something, had just stepped outside his room. and as I slowly turned toward the door, holding the note tightly in my hand, I understood one thing with absolute certainty. This story wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. I didn't move at first. The sound from the hallway was so soft that it could have been anything. The house settling, a shift in the wood, maybe even my nerves making things up. But it didn't feel like that. It felt intentional, like someone was standing just outside the doorway waiting for me to step out. I held my breath and listened again, but the house had gone quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you painfully aware of your own heartbeat. I looked at the door and then back at the note in my hand. Even though my brother's handwriting had always been easy to recognize, I kept checking it again, as if the letters might suddenly change or reveal something new. But they stayed the same, familiar strokes arranged in a way that shouldn't exist. The date still bothered me the most. Today. Not 3 weeks ago. Not sometime before he left us. Today. I wasn't sure if I felt comforted or terrified by the idea that this message, whatever it was, found its way to me exactly now. I finally forced myself to walk toward the door, even though every step made my chest feel heavier. When I looked into the hallway, it was empty. Nothing moved, nothing looked touched, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there only moments ago. Maybe grief really was doing something strange to me. People always talked about grief in cliches, how time slows down, how little things become reminders, how the world feels different. But no one ever said it could make you question your own senses like this. I stepped into the hallway and looked around again, trying to ground myself. The house, which used to feel like a safe place, suddenly felt filled with shadows I didn't remember being there before. I walked into the living room just to make sure everything was normal. The familiar couch was still there, the TV perched on the same slightly crooked stand, and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen buzzed like always. Nothing out of place. And yet, inside me, everything felt out of place. I kept thinking about my brother. About the days leading up to the moment we lost him. About how ordinary everything seemed at the time. He wasn't the type of person to keep secrets. Or at least that's what I always believed. But the note, it suggested something else. Something I had never even considered. What if he had been going through something he never told anyone about? What if he hid things on purpose because he didn't want us to worry? We grew up depending on each other. Our parents were often busy working long hours, so most of our childhood was just the two of us figuring things out. Even when we argued, he'd always circle back and say something like, "We're a team, remember?" He said it so often that it became a little annoying, but now I would give anything to hear him say it again. Maybe that's why the note hit so hard. If this message was meant for me, then it meant he still believed in that team, even after everything. I sank onto the couch and unfolded the note again. I read each word slowly, trying to see if there was anything hidden between the lines. Something small. Something easy to miss. But the message was simple. Too simple. Like it was only part of something bigger. And the last line, it felt like it hinted at something he didn't have the time to explain fully. I whispered the words out loud, hoping they would sound different when spoken. They didn't. As I held the note, I remembered a conversation we had a few months back. It was late and we were sitting in the backyard. He'd been unusually quiet that night. When I asked him what was wrong, he shrugged and said he had been thinking a lot about unfinished things in his life. I laughed it off, telling him he was too young to be talking like an old man. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. I didn't press him. Now I wondered if I should have. That memory dug deeper into me than I expected. It made me realize how many small things I had ignored. The late-night walks he took alone. The days when he seemed distracted, staring off into space. The journal he kept locked in a drawer. At the time, none of it seemed strange. People go through phases. They need space. But now, after the note, all those moments felt connected in some invisible way. I decided to check his room again, but this time not just to look. I wanted to search, really search, for anything that could explain why this note existed. When I stepped back inside, the air felt heavier, like the room didn't want to give up its secrets. I opened his drawers one by one. Old chargers, random receipts, a half-finished sketch he never showed me. Nothing unusual. I checked under the bed, just dust and an old hoodie he'd lost months ago. The closet had boxes, but all filled with things I already knew he owned. For a moment, I wondered if I was overthinking everything. Maybe the note had been written before and he just forgot to date it. Maybe I misread the numbers. Maybe. But then another thought hit me. What if there was something he didn't want found easily? Something personal. Something he hid purposely. I went back to his desk, running my fingers under the drawers, feeling for anything taped or tucked away. Nothing. Then I lifted the bottom panel of the drawer. It felt normal at first, but when I pushed gently, it shifted with a soft click. My breath caught. There was a small, thin envelope inside. Unmarked. Still. I held it for a moment, wondering if I should open it. It felt wrong, but at the same time, I knew my brother wouldn't have hidden something unless it mattered. Maybe it held the missing piece to the note's meaning. Maybe it was something he wanted me to find eventually. I was about to tear it open when a sudden vibration made me jump. It was coming from inside the drawer, his old phone. The same phone he used every day. The same phone that had been powered off since the day we packed up his things. But now it buzzed again. The screen lit up. A notification appeared. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The message on the screen flashed only for a second, but it was long enough for me to read it. And it was long enough for me to realize something impossible. The message was from my brother. And the timestamp said it was sent 20 minutes ago. I stared at the glowing screen, my mind spinning, my hands cold, the envelope still untouched in my other hand. None of it made sense. Not the note. Not the sound in the hallway. Not the message. It felt like the world around me had suddenly tilted, revealing a side of my brother's life I never knew existed. I didn't open the envelope. Not yet. I just stood there staring at his phone, waiting for the screen to light up again, waiting for something, anything, to explain what was happening. But nothing came. Just the quiet room, the faint hum of the house, and the growing sense that whatever path this mystery was pulling me toward, it was only getting darker. And I had no choice but to follow it. I kept staring at the phone long after the screen went dark again, hoping it would light up on its own, hoping another message would appear to explain the first one. But nothing happened. The room slowly slipped back into its stillness, and the only sound left was the faint ringing in my ears. I placed the phone carefully on the desk like it was something fragile that might shatter if I breathed too hard. My brother's name on the message thread felt unreal, like I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to see. I sat on the edge of his bed again, the unopened envelope still in my hand. I ran my thumb along the seal, trying to decide if opening it now would make things better or worse. A part of me wanted answers immediately, but another part felt like opening it would set something bigger into motion, something I wasn't ready for. So I just held it, feeling its weight even though it was barely a few pieces of paper. I kept thinking about that message. Why now? Oh. His phone had been dead for weeks. I remembered the day we found it. The battery was completely drained, and we didn't bother charging it because no one had the heart to look through his private messages or photos. It felt wrong. But now, seeing his name on the screen with a timestamp from today, it felt like the phone had been waiting for the right moment to wake up. I took a deep breath and stood up, walking around the room again, searching for something I might have missed earlier. The more I looked, the more I noticed tiny details I had ignored before. A corner of one of his posters was slightly lifted, like someone had tugged on it. The books on his shelf weren't aligned the way he usually kept them. Even the pens in his cup looked rearranged. Small things, too small to notice at first, but now they stood out like little hints. It made me wonder if someone had been here. Not a stranger, but someone who knew him. Someone who knew the room, the layout, the things he cared about. The thought made my skin crawl, not because it felt dangerous, but because it suggested my brother had more going on in his life than he ever shared. I always thought we told each other everything. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe there were parts of him I never understood. I walked over to his closet and pushed the boxes aside again, this time checking behind them. And that's when I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A small scratch on the back wall, thin and curved, like someone had dragged something metallic across it. It wasn't deep, but it looked recent. I traced my finger along it and felt a slight indentation. It didn't look like something caused by accident. It looked intentional. I stepped back, trying to piece everything together. The note. The message. The envelope. The scratch. None of it connected yet, but I could feel a pattern forming. Something hidden underneath the surface. It was like trying to solve a puzzle without knowing what the picture was supposed to be. My mind drifted to his friend group. He had people he trusted, people he talked to more than he talked to us. Maybe one of them knew something. Maybe they had been in his room recently. Maybe the note wasn't supernatural or mysterious. Maybe someone else placed it here for reasons I didn't understand. It was a possibility, but it didn't explain the message from his phone. I decided to go downstairs and clear my head. The moment I stepped out of his room, something shifted. The air felt colder, like a draft had slipped through the house. I looked down the hallway and noticed the living room light flickering faintly. It wasn't unusual, but tonight even normal things felt suspicious. I walked toward the kitchen and sat at the table, laying the envelope in front of me. I stared at it like it might open on its own. The fridge hum filled the silence, steady and low, grounding me a little. I kept thinking about all the little moments leading up to now, how I'd ignored certain things about my brother because I didn't want to overthink. But now I felt like those moments mattered. Like he left breadcrumbs he didn't want me to find until the right time. And something told me this wasn't the only envelope. Or the only clue. I reached for the phone again, hoping maybe I could access something. His messages, his notes, anything. But when I tapped the screen it didn't turn on. I held the power button. Nothing. I plugged it into a charger. Still nothing. It was as if the phone had only come alive long enough to send one message and then shut down for good. That thought alone sent chills up my arms. I checked the time. Hours had passed, but it felt like only a few minutes. I thought about calling someone, maybe a close friend of his, but what would I say? Hey, I got a message from him today even though he's gone? They'd think I was losing my mind. And honestly, I wasn't sure I didn't feel a little like that myself. I needed another angle, something practical. So I decided to look through his backpack. He always carried it with him even when he didn't need to. It was sitting near the entrance, untouched since the day we brought it home. I unzipped it slowly, half expecting something strange inside. But it looked normal. A few notebooks, old receipts, wrappers, and a small key attached to a chain I didn't recognize. I picked up the key, holding it close. It wasn't for anything in the house. I would have noticed. It looked older, slightly rusted, like it belonged to something he didn't use often. A locker? A storage box? A drawer somewhere else? I tried to remember if he ever talked about having a place he kept things somewhere outside home. But nothing came to mind. I put the key on the table next to the envelope and stared at both items, wondering if they were connected. Maybe the envelope contained hints about the key. Maybe the key led to whatever the note was referring to. Or maybe all of this was coincidence and I was making connections where none existed. But deep down it didn't feel like coincidence. It felt planned. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that my brother had been acting differently even months before. He stayed out late more often. He avoided certain questions. He seemed distracted, lost in his own thoughts. But every time I asked he brushed it off with a smile. I thought he just needed space. Now I wondered if he was dealing with something he couldn't tell anyone. The refrigerator clicked off, leaving the house in complete silence again. I exhaled slowly, the sound loud in the quiet room. I turned the envelope around in my hands one more time, feeling the slight texture of the paper, the light weight of something important inside. I almost opened it. Almost. But something stopped me. A faint sound from the living room. Soft, gentle. Like someone shifting their weight on the floor. I froze. I lifted my head and listened closely. There it was again. Not loud. Not threatening. Just enough to let me know I wasn't alone. And as I stared into the dim hallway, the envelope in my hand, the key on the table, and my brother's phone now forever silent, I felt the tension rising inside my chest again. Whatever mystery he left behind, I was only scratching the surface. And someone, or something, was already one step ahead of me. The sound from the living room wasn't loud, but it was clear enough to pull every bit of warmth out of my body. I held my breath again, listening, waiting for it to happen a third time just so I knew it wasn't my imagination. And then it came, soft, almost hesitant, like someone barely shifting their foot against the floor. I didn't want to move, but staying frozen wasn't helping either. My heart was pounding so hard I worried whoever, or whatever, was out there could hear it. I slowly stood up from the kitchen chair, trying not to make a noise. The envelope was still in my hand, but now it felt like an anchor dragging my thoughts in circles. I stepped carefully toward the hallway, every muscle tight, every nerve awake. The living room looked dim from where I was standing, just a faint glow from the streetlight outside touching the edges of the furniture. Nothing moved. Nothing looked out of place. But the feeling of being watched crept up my spine like cold fingers. I took another step forward and felt the floor creak under me. I froze again. This time, the sound in the living room stopped completely, like whoever was there suddenly held their breath too. That silence was worse than the noise. It made me feel like I had stepped into the very center of something I wasn't meant to see. I reached for the light switch and flicked it on. The room brightened instantly and my eyes scanned every corner. The couch, the table, the TV, everything was exactly where it should be. No open windows, no movement, no shadows slipping out of sight. But something had been there. I felt it in the air. The quiet didn't feel natural. It felt interrupted. I took a slow walk around the living room, pretending to check random things so I didn't feel completely ridiculous. I looked behind the curtains, under the table, even checked the lock on the front door. Everything was locked, untouched. Still, my mind wouldn't let it go. Something had shifted, like the house itself had taken a breath at the wrong time. I returned to the kitchen and picked up the small key again, turning it over between my fingers. The mystery around it felt heavier now. What if someone else was also looking for whatever my brother hid? What if the note wasn't the only message he left behind? What if I wasn't the first person to enter his room today? The more questions I asked myself, the more the house seemed to tighten around me. I remembered the scratch on the back wall of his closet, the slightly moved objects on his desk, the poster corner. All small things on their own, but together they formed a trail of someone searching. Someone who wasn't me. That thought made the tension in my chest twist into something sharp. I grabbed the envelope and the key and went back upstairs. Whatever was happening downstairs, I didn't want to be stuck sitting in the open. My brother's room felt like the only place that made sense right now, even with how unsettling it was. At least in there, everything revolved around him. Around the mystery he left behind. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to calm my breathing. The room felt colder than before. I sat on his bed again, placing the envelope on my lap and holding the key tightly. I wondered if I should call someone, maybe one of his closest friends, but the idea reminded me of something important. His best friend Liam hadn't come around much after the funeral. He showed up once, said he needed time to process everything, then disappeared. Every attempt I made to reach him after that was met with short replies or no response at all. Now, thinking about it, his absence felt suspicious. Like he was avoiding something. Avoiding me. I dug through my brother's backpack again, hoping to find anything that might connect the key to something specific. In one of the side pockets, I found a folded flyer for a storage facility on the other side of town. It wasn't unusual to see those around, but the date scribbled on the corner caught my attention. It was from 3 months ago. And in my brother's handwriting, next to the address, he'd written a time. Just a time. No explanation. I held the flyer, the key, and the envelope together in my hands. It felt like they were pieces of the same puzzle, each one pushing me closer to whatever truth he'd been hiding. I didn't know if I was ready for that truth, but it was clear that something bigger was happening, something my brother had been part of before he passed. As I sat there trying to decide what to do next, my brother's phone lit up again. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The screen glowed softly on the desk, bright enough to make the shadows in the room lean away from it. This time there was no buzzing. No sound at all. Just the screen turning on like someone had tapped it. A new notification appeared. Not a message. A reminder. A reminder my brother had set for himself. The words on the screen made my heart drop. Don't let them find it. I stared at it, the words sinking into me slowly like cold water rising around my waist. Who was them? What was it? And why did his phone choose to show this reminder now, weeks after he was gone? Before I could even process the reminder, another notification appeared under it. A missed call. Recent. My brother's number. I didn't understand any of it. My hands shook as I picked up the phone, even though I knew it wouldn't respond. But the screen stayed lit. It didn't fade away like before. And then something strange happened. The home screen flickered once and a new app icon appeared on the bottom corner. One I had never seen before. A plain black square. No name. No symbol. Just a dark box that felt heavier than anything else in the room. I didn't touch it. I only stared. Everything in the room went quiet again. Even the sound of the house settling seemed to pause. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something massive, something I couldn't escape anymore. The envelope in my lap felt warm now, like whatever was inside it was reacting to the moment. The key pressed into my palm. The reminder glowed on the bright screen. And the silence around me grew thicker, heavier, almost expectant. Something told me that whatever was happening now, my brother set it all in motion long before I ever stepped into his room. And the moment I opened that envelope, or tapped that black icon, the truth was going to hit me full force. But before I could decide which one to face first, I heard another sound. A slow, deliberate click. From the hallway. The kind of sound you hear when someone carefully turns a doorknob. My breath caught, every nerve on edge. Someone was right outside my brother's room. And this time, the doorknob kept turning. The doorknob kept turning, slow, careful, like whoever was on the other side didn't want to be heard but wasn't trying very hard to hide it either. My whole body went tight. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The silence inside the room felt like it was pressing against my skin. I stared at the doorknob, waiting for it to twist all the way, waiting for the door to swing open, waiting for something to happen. But then it stopped. Just like that. No footsteps. No retreating shadow under the door. No sign someone had walked away. It felt like whoever was out there was still standing right on the other side, just listening. I swallowed hard, my throat painfully dry. The envelope was still in my lap, the key still in my hand, and my brother's glowing phone still on the desk beside me. I knew I should say something, call out, ask who was there, but the words wouldn't come out. My voice felt trapped somewhere deep in my chest. The silence stretched so long that I almost convinced myself I imagined everything. Maybe the house was settling again. Maybe the doorknob had moved because of the draft. Maybe grief was twisting reality around me. Maybe. A soft knock came from the door. Just one. Quiet but clear. A knock that didn't feel threatening. More like a signal. A message. A reminder that someone, or something, was acknowledging my presence. I found my voice then. Barely. Hello. It sounded small. Weak. Nothing answered. I stood slowly, trying not to make noise, and took a step toward the door. My heartbeat was loud enough to drown out everything else. I reached for the doorknob, hesitated, and pulled it open just a crack. The hallway was empty. The lights were off. The air felt strangely colder than it should have been. Nothing moved. Nothing had been touched. But the feeling that someone had been standing there only moments ago clung to the air like leftover tension. I opened the door wider, stepping halfway into the hallway. That's when I noticed it, an envelope on the floor right at the bottom of the door frame. But it wasn't the one from inside the drawer. This one was different. The paper was darker, older looking, and slightly crumpled like someone had held it tightly before leaving it there. I crouched slowly, my fingers shaking as I picked it up. There was no writing on it. No marks. Nothing to identify where it came from. But the weight of it felt almost identical to the envelope I still had on the bed. Another clue? Another warning? Another step deeper into a mystery that had no bottom? I went back into the room, shutting the door behind me. My back pressed against the wood as I tried to steady my breathing. My mind was racing, trying to understand how this second envelope appeared without a sound. Whoever left it was close. So close I probably would have heard them breathe if I'd opened the door a few seconds earlier. I placed the new envelope beside the first one. 2 sealed secrets sitting side by side, each one holding something my brother wanted hidden. Or protected. I wasn't sure which anymore. I turned toward my brother's phone again and froze. The screen had changed. The black icon that had appeared earlier was now pulsing softly, like a heartbeat. A faint glow expanding and shrinking, drawing my attention whether I wanted it to or not. I didn't touch it. I stood still, watching, waiting. Then the phone vibrated. Not loudly. Just once, sharp enough to feel through the floorboards. A new message appeared on the screen. This time it wasn't from my brother. It came from an unknown number. No name. No contact photo. Just digits. But the message was simple. Don't open the wrong one. My stomach dropped. The wrong one? Did that mean one of the envelopes was dangerous? Or maybe meant to mislead me? Or maybe both were clues but only one led to the truth? Another vibration shook the phone. A second message from the same unknown number. They're already in the house. The room spun slightly and I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself. My breathing came faster, my mind racing for any explanation, any logical piece that could make sense of what was happening. But logic had left the house the moment my brother's phone lit up earlier. I forced myself to look around the room again. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The air felt too still, too controlled, like something was waiting for me to make a move. The shadows seemed deeper in the corners. The silence felt heavier, almost alive. I picked up the key again, clutching it tightly. It felt like the only physical thing I had that connected to something real. Something grounded, something outside this house. That's when another realization hit me. The storage facility. The flyer in his backpack. The time he wrote next to the address. What if he'd been keeping something there? Something he couldn't risk leaving at home? Something he knew someone might come looking for? And what if the people searching for it weren't finished yet? The thought sent a chill through me, worse than anything I'd felt so far. If they were already in the house, then the mystery wasn't just about my brother anymore. It was about whatever he'd been involved in. Whatever he'd been trying to protect. I took a step away from the door toward the 2 envelopes sitting on the bed. The new one seemed darker in the dim light, like it didn't belong here. Like it didn't come from my brother. Before I could decide which one to open, the house made a sound I hadn't heard all night. A soft, steady thump. Not footsteps, not exactly. More like something being put down gently on the floor. Right outside the bedroom door. I froze. My breath hitched. Every hair on my arm stood straight up. Then came a whisper. Not words. Just a faint, shifting breath on the other side of the door. Like someone leaning in. Listening. Waiting. And the worst part? The whisper wasn't alone. There were 2 of them. 2 distinct breaths. 2 different rhythms. Whoever was out there. It wasn't just one person anymore. When I stepped back into the hallway, the silence felt heavier than before, almost like the house itself was waiting for me to make the next move. My hands were still shaking from what I had just discovered, the old notebook hidden inside the broken wall, filled with my brother's handwriting. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But as much as I wanted to stop, to breathe, to clear my head, I knew I couldn't. The story he had left behind, the one he clearly hadn't finished, was dragging me deeper every minute. I went back into his room, forcing myself not to look at the empty bed where he used to sleep. I sat on the floor, opened the notebook again, and read the last line he had written. It was simple but terrifying in its own quiet way. If anything happens to me, follow the second door. At first, I thought he was being poetic or dramatic like usual, but after everything I had read, it didn't feel like a metaphor anymore. It felt literal. It felt urgent. I looked around the room trying to understand what he meant. There was only one actual door, the one leading to the hallway. But then I remembered something strange. When I was a kid, I used to think there was a second doorway in his room because of the weird outline behind his closet. Back then, everyone told me it was just my imagination, just shadows. But now, with everything that was happening, I wasn't sure anymore. I stood up, moved his old wooden closet away from the wall, and that's when I saw it clearly, a faint rectangular outline, like a sealed door hidden under layers of paint. My heart dropped. He must have known about it. He must have found a way to open it. And he must have written about it in that missing second half of the notebook. I pressed my hand against the outline, feeling the cold texture beneath the paint. Something about it felt wrong, like it shouldn't exist in a normal house. I took a step back, my breathing uneven. For a moment, I thought I heard a soft sound on the other side, a small thud, almost like something shifting. I froze, not sure if it was real or just my nerves taking over. I told myself I needed answers, that I couldn't stop now. So I grabbed one of the tools from the drawer, a flat metal scraping knife he used for repairing furniture, and slowly dragged it along the edges of the hidden outline. Small flakes of paint fell to the floor, revealing a thin gap beneath. I pushed a little harder, trying to pry it open, but the door stayed firm. Before I could try again, my phone suddenly buzzed in my pocket, nearly making me jump. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered it. There was a moment of complete silence on the other end, followed by a soft inhale, like someone was trying to steady themselves before speaking. "Stop looking," a voice whispered. I froze in place. The whisper was shaky, almost distorted, but clear enough to understand. My whole body tensed. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely coming out. But the person didn't respond. The call ended immediately. My hands were trembling now, and every instinct told me to get out of the house, to leave everything alone. But I kept thinking about my brother, how quiet he had become in the last few months, how distant he had seemed, how he suddenly stopped visiting family gatherings without explanation. He wasn't someone who got into trouble. He wasn't the type to keep secrets. And yet he did. Deep ones. Dangerous ones. Ones that didn't end with him being here anymore. I looked back at the hidden door. If someone didn't want me to look, it only meant there was something there, something my brother didn't want buried. Against every bit of common sense, I pressed my ear to the wall again. This time, instead of a thud, I heard something different, like soft, rhythmic tapping. Not random. Not natural. It was too deliberate, like someone tapping in a pattern. I took a step back, my heart racing, and in that moment, the attic light flickered, the same way it had earlier when I first entered his room. It was like the whole house reacted to my movements. Then something completely unexpected happened. As I stood in front of the hidden door, the floorboard under me made a cracking sound, and a small square piece of wood popped up slightly. I knelt down and lifted it carefully. Beneath it was a small empty compartment. Empty except for a single object resting at the bottom. A tiny silver key. My breath caught. It was old, slightly worn, and cold to the touch, as if it had been hidden for years. On the side of the key was a tiny engraving, matching the strange symbol my brother had drawn on the last page of the notebook. He had left this for me. Hidden it so only I would find it if I looked carefully enough. I stood slowly, the key in my hand, and stared at the hidden door. My brother had written about someone watching him, following him, recording things he never meant anyone to know. He mentioned doors. Secrets. A truth he couldn't escape. Now I was right in the middle of it. I moved closer, searching the edges until I found a small, almost invisible hole near the bottom corner. With a deep breath, I slid the key inside. The moment I turned it, a faint click echoed behind the wall. The outline shifted. Dust fell. The hidden door moved. But right before it opened completely, before I could see what was behind it, something happened that froze me in place. From the other side of the door, I heard a voice. A familiar one. Soft. Trembling. And impossible. It whispered my name. Not just anyone's voice. My brother's. And then the door slowly creaked open, leaving me staring into the darkness as the final piece of the mystery waited on the other side.